duplicate session again tomorrow night, but we know that some parents might not be able to join us tonight, so it will be available to them as well. So at this time, I'm just going to ask that the slide deck be started, and we'll talk a little bit about what's coming up tonight. So if we could just kind of start off with some introductions. What I'd like to do is introduce a few folks to you here tonight. I'll start with our board chair, Henry Effon. So Henry, if you could give us a wave. Henry is the newly elected board chair. We have, many of you know, the Beaumont trustee, Liz Taylor-Sirwa. Give us a wave, Liz. There we go. We have from Ponoka, trustee Marilyn Burke. We have Leduc trustee Don Miller. And lastly, we have from Lacombe, trustee Donna Tugwood. There's also Principal Kurt Barron, Principal Jordan Robinson. My name's Charlie Bouchard. I'm the superintendent of the school division. I'll be leading this session here tonight. So again, welcome everyone. At this time, I would like to ask trustee Taylor-Sirwa to lead us in prayer.
Thank you, Charlie. If you'll all join me in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, Amen. Heavenly God, we come before you today, asking for your guidance, wisdom, and support as we begin this meeting. Help us engage in meaningful discussion, allow us to grow closer as a group, and nurture the bonds of community. Enlighten us, God, we pray. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, Amen.
Thank you, trustee Sirwa. So just a little bit of an overview of what we will speak about and talk about this evening. And before I kind of go through this quick agenda, I would ask that if you have any questions, you might just want to jot them down beside yourself or put them in your phone, in your notes, whatever you prefer as your method. There will be a question and answer period at the end of the session where we can get into some of this. We've chosen to do it that way simply because we don't want to interrupt the presentation, only to answer questions that may be covered later on. So with that said, what we want to cover here today is just to talk a little bit about what the provincial requirements and process are for moving forward with a new high school, give you some updates on that. We also want to, at some point, we're going to share with you a survey towards the end of the evening, and we're going to seek feedback from parents and guardians regarding a reconfiguration of both schools. And then we'll talk about the next steps in the board deliberations and what's involved with that. So that's kind of where we're going to head as the night goes on. So to begin with, the board annually has to submit a capital plan to the province. It's approved by the Board of Trustees in their spring process. And the capital plan lists the division priorities for facilities. That includes new construction as well as modernizations. Now I put a section here in black, which says you must include commentary on the availability of service land for new construction. That is new in the last 2 or 3 years. Prior to that, it wasn't a requirement. And what was happening is the province would announce projects only to find out that there was no land available. And that really caused a lot of complications provincially with how they rolled those projects out. So they've included that as a part of their process, as I say, about 2 or 3 years ago. So you can see here, this is right out of the division's capital plan. You can see that Beaumont High School for new construction is the #1 priority of Star Catholic. So the Board of Trustees have for the last few years identified a new high school in Beaumont as its #1 priority. The next thing that the province looks at are enrollment pressures. I think it's important that we just kind of have a little bit of a context here that 85% capacity is deemed full. So all of the space in a school is calculated, and I've given you some examples here. So the learning commons or library, the foods lab, the gym, office space, the CTS spaces, for example, woodworking, all of those are part of the spaces in the school. We know that the office space can be a classroom, although we have had that in some situations when we've overcrowded. But I say that because 85% is really when all the classrooms are being utilized. When you get to 100%, you're starting to schedule regular classes in the above areas. So you no longer have a learning commons or a library, it becomes 1 or 2 classrooms. Many of you who have children who've been around since Mother Duville opened, you'll recall that when we were in St. Andre and we had both schools in there, we were at that time over 100% capacity, and we had 2 classes in the learning commons, we had kids in the gymnasium, etc., as for classrooms. What's challenging is some spaces like the woods shop cannot be used as a classroom other than when it's being used for woods. However, that is calculated into the percentage of utilization. So that is part of the challenges of a school facility and the space. Also, on behalf of capital planning, they look at enrollment pressures in these 3 ways. They look at enrollment pressures in the community of Beaumont, they look at it by school, and then they look at it as a division. So let's look at each of those a little more detail. So when we look at enrollment pressures by community, the province has told us that currently they feel that Beaumont has sufficient high school space. That's because Beaumont Comp's undergoing a modernization and the new Francophone school is in process. So with that said, we know, Black Gold and I, we've been talking, and we know that in 3 years, the high school space in Beaumont won't be enough, even with the modernization and the Francophone school. The community of Beaumont, it's not growing quite as fast as it once was, but it is still growing. And with the amount of kids that are in the K-9 system, we know that all of that, when it rolls up, the community of Beaumont in 3 years will be short of space. Let's have a look at the 2 schools. Right now, St. Andre is at 63% capacity. Interestingly, for the last couple of years, the kindergarten enrollment has been lower than normal, than what we've experienced in the past. We're not sure if that's the trend or if it's a factor of COVID. That's something that we don't have a handle on, obviously because of COVID. Mother Duville is at 71% capacity. Again, I just remind you that 85% is considered full. Let's talk about the division as a whole now. Currently, Christ the King School in Leduc is the designated high school for Catholic education for Beaumont students. Christ the King is at 57% capacity. Now, something the government has told us is that because the Beaumont parents are not sending the children to Christ the King, they're viewing that as a statement that Beaumont families don't value Catholic education for their high school children. We've communicated back to the province and said, well, the Beaumont parents have told us they value Catholic education, but they want it in their own community. They don't want to send the kids to Christ the King because of the bus ride, which we know is 20 to 25 minutes without stops. So that's kind of the back and forth that we're having with the province. But it is a statement that's come back to us over and over, is that if the parents really want Catholic education, why aren't they sending the kids to Christ the King in Leduc? The Board of Trustees has said that if the threshold of 10 students commit to riding the bus, they'll provide the bus. If it's under 10, they won't. So for the last 2 years, we've offered that, and we haven't met the threshold of 10 students. So again, just capturing, the enrollment pressures. Right now, the province is, although we're advocating and putting in our capital plan that we want a new high school in Beaumont, they're saying, okay, your schools aren't full enough. You saw the enrollment in the 2 schools. They're saying the community of Beaumont's fine for now, and the division has room to take those Mother Duville kids for grade 10 to Christ the King. And we'll talk more about this in a bit. So I also mentioned that you have to submit with your capital plan a commitment to have service land. In Beaumont, for a high school, we would need between 11 and 15 acres of land to build that high school. The city of Beaumont currently does not have any service land for any school projects of any size. There's no service land in Beaumont. The Board of Trustees and administration have met and communicated with the city on multiple occasions the need for service land. We keep saying we need service land if we want to try to get a high school here for our Catholic kids. Black Gold has also told the city we need space because they're also advocating for a new high school because they're going to be full in 3 years. The city has returned communication on multiple times saying that they're at the mercy of developers. I'll speak more to that in a second, but they're saying that it's not in their control. The Board of Trustees and administration have also communicated that same need for service land to MLA Rutherford. So the politicians, your Board of Trustees, and the local municipal politicians and provincial politicians, we've communicated with them very well and they're aware of the request. You could call MLA Rutherford and he would confirm that he's in the loop and he understands this request. So on May 25th, frustrated with kind of the continued lack of progress over several years, Trustee Taylor Sirois, then Board Chair Lemaire and myself, we went to a city council meeting and we spoke again about our frustration and how there needs to be service land in the city of Beaumont. If there's no service land right now, we've said, could you give us a letter of commitment that if we get an announcement within 12 months or a year, you'll service that land? The city has indicated they're unable to provide that letter. Once again, they're saying we're kind of at the mercy of the developers. So it's kind of, we're going around and around here. I think you're seeing that the issue right now is there's no service land. However, at that meeting, one thing that resulted and was positive coming out of that meeting was a commitment to a meeting between city officials, including the mayor and his administrative staff, both school divisions, trustees, representatives from both school divisions, as well as the developers. We all met on as a result of that meeting. And that developer meeting with the city and the school administration happened August 26th. So just go ahead on the slide, please, Tara, thank you. So again, at that August 26th meeting, we reiterated the need for service land. We talked about how if there's a failure to service land in Beaumont, we're going to have an issue because Beaumont Comp will be full. And Black Gold has said they're going to have to bus their high school students out of Leduc, or sorry, out of Beaumont to New Sarepta or Leduc. That's not a good situation for anybody. So if the province and the city are thinking, okay, well, Stark Catholic doesn't need a high school, they can just go to Beaumont Comp. Well, Beaumont, Black Gold and Beaumont Comp will be full, and it'll be another issue. There's currently 3 developments in the city of Beaumont. They're at various stages with their developments. With that said, many of those municipal reserves on developer lands are too small for a high school. Remember, I said we need between 11 and 15 acres. Under the Municipal Government Act, you have to allocate 10% of any new development as reserve space, which includes high schools. So depending on the parcel of land, that's why we don't always end up with enough space for a high school development. But let's look at each of those 3 developments in a little more detail. So Elan, that's on the west side of Leduc. It's kind of over a little bit north of the RV place that's over there. There's also like a tree farm, I think, on the very north part of that development. They're projecting to be 4 years away, but they only have 5.4 acres. So you can see that that's not large enough for a high school. Again, 11 to 15 acres is what we're after. Lakeview, which is in the southeast part of Beaumont, has 9 acres. Not quite large enough for a high school. They're saying that it could be serviced within 12 to 14 months. So that part's good. But they're saying to the city of Beaumont, if you want to purchase a little bit of our development, we can expand that 9 acres. So I think that's the most promising. Larev is in the north. I think it's east of 50th. That one doesn't have any school sites in their first phase, so it's not really in consideration. But something the city of Beaumont has said is they may have land in the Business Innovation Park. And you've kind of heard of that in your local community. I think there were announcements about that Business Innovation Park last spring. At the August 26th meeting, the city asked both school divisions if we were interested in partnering together for a new school. So for those of you with children in St. Andre, who've had kids in St. Andre, you know, we already partner with Black Gold and Doncereau Meadows, you know, already. So we expressed at that time, yes, we would be open to a partnership. We'll do whatever we have to do to make this move forward. So that is a little bit of a possibility as well. I will let you know that there's a meeting on December 3rd between both superintendents and the city CAO, where we're going to talk about, okay, where are things at? Because from the August 26th meeting, we agreed to meet again in 3 months. So that's kind of where we're at now. We need to kind of move forward with things. So we're going to talk some more and see where progress has been made and where we need to go with that. Talking a little bit about how the provincial budgets and announcement of projects work. Projects are typically announced in the spring when the province rolls out their new budget. We've missed this round of announcements. So the announcements that will happen this spring of 22, because in our capital plan, we had to say there was no service land or a commitment to service land in the city of Beaumont. So we missed the window for this spring announcements. The earliest we could see an announcement would be in the spring of 2023. And I've underlined the word if. If there's a commitment letter from the city or developer to service land accompanying this year's capital plan. So if in our capital plan this spring, we can, you know, indicate that there is land that could be ready for us, now we're going to get a serious consideration from the province. From when the time the province announces a new school project to when it opens is 3 years, because you have to go through about a year of design and another 2.5 years of construction. So therefore, the earliest we could see a new high school would be for the 26-27 school year. So that's the number that is going to factor in a bit. So one of the questions that's been raised in the community, it's been mentioned and brought to the board table by Trustee Taylor Sirois, is can the 2 existing schools be reconfigured to accommodate high school students? So as just kind of a reminder, St. Andre, Academy St. Andre Academy is at 63%. And at École Mother Duville, they're at 71%. So again, using 85%, yes, there is room at these 2 schools, as you can see here. So administration then was tasked with kind of looking at 2 scenarios. 1, reconfigure St. Andre as a K-6 and Mother Duville as a 7-12. Scenario 2, reconfigure St. Andre as a K-5 and Mother Duville as a 6-12. So let's look at those in a little bit more detail. Scenario 1 was deemed not feasible, and that's because St. Andre can't absorb 2 grades or the equivalent of 6 to 8 classes. St. Andre currently has about 3 or 4 classroom spaces that could be used for grade 5. By adding 1 grade, St. Andre would lose their music room, their science lab, their intervention room, and their family school liaison room. By adding grade 6, we'd have to turn the learning commons and the library in the classroom and maybe even the gym and put desks in the gym. And as you can imagine, that's not a good option. So that's why we deem it not really feasible. Of note is St. Andre has no room for additional portables. All the portables that can be added on to Academy St. Andre have already been added on with previous year's growth. So that school is at a full build. There's no more possibility with that. Let's look at a little bit at this scenario, scenario 2. In yellow, the year 22-23, that's next school year, you could add grade 10 to Mother Duville. and subsequently grade 11 and grade 12. What I will mention is the capacity limits. You can see in the first year would be 71%. So currently that school's at 71%. And when you add grade 10, it would stay at 71%. And that's because Mother Duville would just keep all the kids they currently have. St. Andre wouldn't send their grade 5s over to Mother Duville. They would stay at St. Andre. So the population of Mother Duville's in essence exactly the same. That's assuming that all the grade 9s stay for grade 10. However, the year after, grade 11, we're at 88%. Remember, I said 85% is considered full. When the grade 12s are there, now we're at 100%. And you can see that just kind of continues on depending on the year, but it's definitely 100% thereon. I remind you that the earliest a new high school could be built would be 26-27. That's assuming that we can get a commitment to service some land by this spring. So what does that mean for learning? I think it's important that parents understand what that means when we get to those percentages. In the 23-24 school year, the art room and foods lab would need to be used as classrooms. In 24-25, the Learning Commons library, we're talking about Mother Duville, and likely the gym would need to be used as classrooms. So further, I'd like to just have you understand that the school is not designed as a high school, and it's missing some of the key high school learning spaces. So for example, a drama room, science labs for high school, a larger gym. The gym at Mother Duville is not a high school gym. There's no bleachers, for example, and it's not a full two-station gym. It doesn't have a lot of the large ancillary spaces that a high school would have, or the larger CTS and industrial art spaces. Also of note is, this is our experience when we had overcrowding in other division schools, you're going to have some pushback from neighbors. They'll express concerns about traffic and parking. So we all know that once you put high school kids in a building, they all start to drive or want to drive their vehicles to school. Mother Duville doesn't have parking to accommodate that, so those children would be parking on the streets, sometimes blocking neighbors' driveways, and we've experienced that before. Now on the right, I will mention a few things about portables. So the province will consider portables once you get to 100%. And it usually takes 1 or 2 years to get those portables. Mother Duville can accommodate up to 6 portables. So there is room there for portables. So optimistically, it could be as early as 25-26, but more likely 26-27. Those 6 portables could accommodate about 150 students, is what they're rated at. So there is room for that. However, again, you'll have a full build of students in 6 to 12, but you'll have inadequate facilities in essence, but they'll be jammed in there, I guess is one way to put it. So let's look at the pros and cons of this. So why would we want to do this? Well, first off, it'll drive up the enrollment numbers and demonstrate that families do indeed want Catholic education for their high school children. It'll also demonstrate that there's enrollment pressures in our Beaumont schools, validating the need for additional space, like a high school. And it'll support the Board of Trustees advocacy efforts, because right now, trustees are saying to the province, we need a new high school, and they're saying, well, you don't have full capacity in your other 2 schools, and the parents aren't sending their kids to Leduc. So by putting the kids in the school, the trustee advocacy would line up with that, because you could say, look at all the students in our schools. Now, on the other side, the cons, there's no service land. And despite demonstrating enrollment pressures, the government will not be able to respond. So you can say all you want, the school's full, but there's no land serviced. So the government will not give you a new school. The quality of learning will be negatively impacted after 85% capacity. Students will be negatively impacted for at minimum 4 years, and that's the chart that I showed previously. Also, the facility is not well set up for high school programming, and even with portables, École Mother Duville is not a great long-term solution. So here's what we're asking of parents. How can the Board of Trustees best advocate for a high school in Beaumont? So based on what you've heard, what should the trustees consider, or maybe you have some ideas that would be beneficial for us? And then we want to know your thoughts on those reconfiguration scenario of moving St. Andre from what it is now to a K-5 and Mother Duville to a 6-12. So considering all of those implications, should the division pursue this possibility? And then we have a spot for just general comments. So we're going to repeat this session tomorrow night. So people that may be interested and aren't here, please encourage them. It's not just a Mother Duville issue. So St. Andre parents might be saying, well, that's not really for me. It's about high school. My kids are only in grade 1. But it is reconfiguring St. Andre as well. And it does have implications long-term. So we're going to have the session recorded. We're going to post it on both school websites. We're going to put it on the division website. And then we're going to invite all parents through School Messenger to watch the recording if they weren't able to attend. And we're going to leave that survey open for 2 weeks so that they can provide feedback to these questions. And then what will happen is at the December board meeting, the Board of Trustees will review this feedback and decide on the next steps. And then we'll communicate and close the loop. We'll communicate back to parents shortly thereafter. So in the comments, I'm going to ask our Manager of Communications, Caitlin Kehoe, to post the survey link, and parents, you're more than welcome to open that up and do the survey anytime in the next 2 weeks. But for now, our Assistant Superintendent of Learning Services, Lori Cardinal, will moderate a bit of a chat. So if you have any questions, type them into the chat and she'll be the moderator, and I'll do my best to answer them as we move along. So go ahead, and if you have any questions, populate them in the chat and we'll have a bit of a Q&A.
Everybody must be busy looking at the survey.
Just be patient, give people a few minutes.
I could be wrong, but I actually don't see, no, it must be my computer. I don't see the chat option.
Okay, so I don't know if it's Lisa or Liza. I know that it's a good last name, Bouchard, but do you have a question that you would like to say verbally?
No, I was just looking to see where I could, because I use Zoom all the time. I was looking to see where I could use the chat, and I can't see my option for some reason.
Okay.
Probably just me.
No, this is Amanda Teitler. I don't have the chat option as well.
Okay, go ahead, Amanda, if you have a question. Or I don't know, do some of you see the chat box at the bottom? I'm seeing a lot of nodding of heads from the people that I can see and some thumbs. So I'm not sure if maybe it's an iPhone thing, but I do see that we have some questions coming in now. So Lori, what's our first question, if you could?
So this is just more of a comment than a question. It says, I think we should focus and channel our energy more into the positive side of expanding existing schools to accommodate high school than focusing more on the negative side of it. And then
Okay,
someone I think was just saying that comments are under the more section.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the next question, please.
That's all we have so far.
Okay,
I've gotten a couple that were sent to me directly. I can read them out loud.
sure. Thanks, Caitlin.
What are some other options for busing to Leduc? Can we lower the 10 student cap?
Right, okay. So the Board of Trustees a couple of years ago made the motion to run the bus with 10. So that's at quite a loss. To run a bus is about $60,000 to $70,000. So the funding for 10 students would still probably be a loss of about 40,000. So the Board of Trustees has said, okay, we'll subsidize it, but only to a certain amount.
I've got another one here. Which school is larger?
Well, right now, St. Andre is larger. And that's because of the portables. When Mother Duville is fully built, then it will have more space once it has all the portables on it. So Mother Duville is at a full build at 600 students. So just regarding the one comment about, we should focus more on the positives and less on the negatives. I think it is important to let parents know that, this is what a full school looks like. I think it would be unfair to parents in the community. Once you have no longer a library and you maybe even lose your gym, because you have classes in there and parents say, how come you didn't tell us this was a possibility? I don't think that's fair. So why we put two sides to that equation is just to try to be transparent so people understand what it might look like once you get to those capacities.
Okay, there's a question. Will there most likely be some kind of reconfiguration for next year?
So those are all options that the Board of Trustees may consider. So depending on service land, for example, they may take a certain course. We do know in speaking to Principal Robinson that if the board chooses to do a reconfiguration and to move forward, that we would need to know, probably by the end of January at the latest, because we would have to start to program staff and start to plan around that.
Okay, and another one, how many portables, if any, does St. Andre have capacity for? And I assume that's to add on.
Yeah, so St. Andre is already at full capacity. There's no room for portables. They've already been added. So there's no ability to add any more portables at St. Andre. But there's just no physical space on the property.
Okay, and another comment. I think the only way to encourage the government to provide service land is to undergo reconstruction, or perhaps maybe that means reconfiguration. Overcrowding is going to occur in any scenario, and the decision is when will it occur?
So when we speak, the government, we're talking about really the city of Beaumont. So the provincial government doesn't get involved in servicing land in municipalities. So it's really the city of Beaumont. And this is where we keep coming against a bit of a brick wall, because the city of Beaumont says we're at the hands of developers. So the city of Beaumont, it's not like they don't want to service land, they would have to probably purchase the land. So yeah, they have that possibility, but the city's told us that they've extended themselves between two things. First, they've got the new rec center, where they've gone into quite a bit of debt to build the new rec facility on the west side. And secondly, the business innovation park is where they've put a lot of their resources right now. So that's kind of what they've told us.
Okay, and just a comment, I think consolidation at this point is a more realistic expectation. How much of a financial increase would the school board get at full enrollment, or the school division?
Maybe that person could give us a little more detail. You roughly get, with everything all in, between the per student grants and your facilities grants and so on, about 10,000 a student is kind of what it is, but I'm not sure how that factors into this process. So maybe that person could give us more information.
Kyle Willett, if you would like to unmute your microphone and speak to that.
Yeah, sorry, just more interesting in general funding, right? So if we've increased the count of our students, so that is that not a net benefit of us? It's almost like a point of advantage or pro in the fact that our funding, we would have funding increase relative to the amount of students we now have.
Okay, thanks for that clarification, Kyle. Yeah, so most of the, so the funding for those students would allow for the purchase of the additional staff to teach them, educational assistants. And again, as I said, you get a portion of that 10,000 is for facilities. So you have increased custodial costs, maintenance costs, utility costs, all of that. So we would get more revenue, but our expenses would go up as well.
Okay, thank you. Currently, Christ the King does not offer French immersion. How soon do you think they could add those programs?
Okay, so the Board of Trustees a number of years back took the position that they would add French immersion at Christ the King as it rolled up through Leduc. So currently French immersion is offered up to grade 6. So next year, grade 7 will be offered at Father Leduc. So when those grade 7s get to grade 10, there will be enough students between Leduc and in theory Beaumont to sustain a French immersion program. So it wouldn't be for another 3 years. Now, we have looked at this in the past as well. So Assistant Superintendent Lori Cardinal, who's moderating, has looked at, you can run a bare bones French immersion program. However, we would need at minimum 2 teachers to run that program. So that could happen sooner, but it would be at loss of funds, but the Board of Trustees could consider that if there's enough desire.
A question, has the board involved architects and engineers in the expansion process to determine for sure that the facilities we have now cannot accommodate high school?
There's not really anything that an architect could assist us with. So portables would be added on to Mother Duville. As I said, there's a possibility of 6. So that school, Mother Duville, was designed, so you have to have firewalls to add portables. The firewalls have been put there at Mother Duville, so there's no architectural work that needs to be done. So when we get to the position, if parents said, yeah, let's reconfigure, when you get to that 100%, you can start asking for some of those 6 portables to be added on. And we just, the Board of Trustees has to pay for the transport of those portables, but we could go ahead with those whenever we get them. So unless somebody wants to expand a little bit about what they meant with that question, but I think there's not really anything for an architect to do.
I think it's busy, not sure. If you want to unmute your mic.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. My question was that we have the building, we have the structures there, and who make the determination that structures cannot be, cannot expand it, we cannot put more floors into the existing one. Have we spoken to a structural engineer that look into the design of the structure right now to know for sure that, okay, what we have right now cannot put more floors into it, and the architect have already looked at the space that we have right now to say for sure, more structures cannot be added other than the portable. Because if we have the room for the portables and we have the expansion where the portables are going to be, where we're going to have a foundation, I'm going to have a structure that is going to have how many floors, 2, 3, and with that, the existing property that we have right now, we can keep it the way it is and see if we can now do the expansion instead of portable, have a structure here.
Okay, thanks for that question. So it is something that could be investigated. However, we know that the school is not designed to add 3 and 4 floors, but that is something that we could get a structural engineer to give us, some sense of. But with that, I think we have to understand though that that would incur a substantial cost, and it would be interesting. It's a good point. Like, would it pay for itself? I will tell you though that the Mother Duville is on a small piece of land. So it doesn't have fields, for example, for high school athletics. It doesn't have parking for high school students either. So even if we went up, we wouldn't have those kind of things, and we'd have to build a new gym or expand on it, which we are limited in the space. But that is something you could put in your feedback that you wish the board to pursue if that's your sentiment. Thank you.
And also, how many of the Mother Divorce students have crossed to Black Gold because of lack of Catholic senior high in Beaumont? Now, if they cross into Black Gold, then the number of people going to Leduc is going to definitely, reduced. And if they say, okay, we have less than 10 people, that's the reason why they cannot provide the transportation. Has anyone investigated where those other students, where do they have their senior high?
So right now,
they must have completed somewhere. If not Leduc, somewhere. So where?
okay, if I understood the question, you're asking where are the current students going? They're going to Beaumont Comp.
Yeah, if they don't go to Leduc, they must have been going somewhere.
They're going to Beaumont Comp. Most of the students, as I understand, are going to Beaumont Comp.
Because we don't have the facilities for them.
Yeah, and that's where Beaumont Comp is starting to feel stretched as well.
Okay.
And that actually leads into our next question, which is, you've stated that you tried to get a letter from the city about the prospect of a new build. However, have you spoken to Black Gold to get a letter that provides what percentage of students switched from Catholic to public education for grade 10?
Well, we have those numbers. So I don't know. When I talked to Alberta Ed recently, it was actually yesterday, and I said to them, the parents of Beaumont are committed to Catholic education. If you're going to say that they're not interested in Catholic education, I can get you 500 signatures. We could get parents in Beaumont to sign a petition. And maybe that's something that we can do with our capital submission, is to show that. I've also said to Alberta Ed, a new high school for us is a relief on enrollment pressure for Black Gold and Beaumont Comp, right? And they're saying that's a good case. If you can make that case, please do so in your capital plan. We did so last year, but I think we can strengthen it up. And maybe one of the ways we do that is to get, parents to indicate on a petition, that they do want high school, a Catholic high school in Beaumont. Because right now, Alberta Ed says they obviously don't. They're not going to Leduc. And I have to say, well, it's not the same. It's not the same as having a school in your own community. The issue is when you think of Edmonton, that's their context. A lot of the people that are working in Alberta Ed, kids go all over the city for different kinds of program, right? So they say 20 minutes to go to school is not very far. I have to explain to them that we're not in an urban setting, we're in a rural setting. The roads aren't the same, there's not public transportation, and on and on. So we're trying to build that case with Alberta Ed.
Okay, we have a couple of questions in regards to class sizes once the schools are at full capacity. So what would the class sizes be?
Well, we know that right now they fluctuate. They have for a number of years between the two schools. Typically, we run between 60 and 80 students grade. So depending on how that works out, we've got some grades with as few as 3 classes, but typically we have 4 classes per grade.
Okay, if we're adding grade 5 to Academy St. Andre, what is the priority for programs to remain? If we don't need all 4 classrooms, do we have options for music, science, as well as the intervention liaison room?
Yeah, so Principal Barron has said that they have, between 3 and 4 classes. So if we bring grade 5 back to or keep grade 5 at St. Andre, and there are only 3 in the grade that year, then I would leave 1 room free. That is a school-based decision. So Principal Barron with his staff would determine which room doesn't get used as a classroom. And we wouldn't dictate that as a central office decision. It would be the school making that decision, weighing the pros and cons of their programming.
Okay, is there a way to shift some of the French immersion students to the Beaumont Francophone School to increase capacity in the STAR schools while allowing them to continue their French education?
So, well, first off, parents would have to want to go over there, but to attend a Francophone school, you have to have one parent that's Francophone. So you just can't attend the Francophone school without that. You have to declare as Francophone. That's my understanding. I'm not sure we would want to push our students away to the Francophone school. If somebody else has information on that, either the principals or assistant superintendents. But my understanding is you have to be Francophone to attend, one parent. I'm seeing some nodding of heads.
I received another direct message. Is there anything as community members that we can do to convince the city of Beaumont to buy more land, sign petitions?
So we have this meeting on December 3rd. Depending on the outcome of that could be a good course of action, is for the community of parents and guardians to, advocate, to lobby the city of Beaumont politicians for heightened priority on that. We do have new councillors, a new mayor in Beaumont. It doesn't hurt to have another round of advocacy to that effect. So there's definitely, I would say, some possibilities around that.
Okay, I have no further questions in the chat.
Okay, so again, this session will be duplicated tomorrow. So if there are people not in attendance tonight, and we would appreciate it if you could promote it with those folks. You can see this is a decision that impacts all the families and students in the two schools. It's not just a Mother Duville issue or possible implication. It is both schools. It's also something that will take some time. You can see in the modeling that the earliest we could get a new school would be in 4 years. So if people are thinking, well, that doesn't pertain to me, my kids are only in elementary, it does, because it'll be a while before we can move in that direction. So seeing no other questions, on behalf of the Board of Trustees, local trustee Taylor Sirois, I would like to thank you for your attendance, your participation, helping us to get the word out with other families, and to be an advocate for the children in your schools and in your community. Thank you, everyone.
I see a question coming in the chat, Mr. Bouchard.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, there was one last one here. I just saw it here. In the event that the only option is to expand, would there be a possibility to work with Christ the King? For example, send students in high school to Leduc for option classes via school bus so that they can still take the options that Mother Duville can't provide.
Yeah, that's a possibility. There's an issue with that, I have to say. This is actually a perfect example. Christ the King does not have the facility of a high school either. And Principal Robinson can attest to that. So the issues that I talk about with putting a high school in Mother Duville, that's the exact scenario at Christ the King. So the gym is a little bit bigger at Christ the King, but they don't have the same CTS spaces, et cetera, that a larger high school would have. And that's why the Board of Trustees is also advocating for a new high school in Leduc. So it is kind of a catch-22, but there is some room there because of capacity for some of that programming. I see a couple more comments going in.
There's one more here. Would the Francophone school make allowances for French immersion students to attend because of the school capacity issues we're having? Just as an interim solution, it might be worth a conversation.
Well, they haven't started construction on their build yet. So they're just in design phase, but they're currently sending their kids to us at Mother Duville for foods, I believe. Is that correct? Yes. So We couldn't send them any kids right now. They don't have the space. They're in the process of building a new school.
I did get another direct message as well. Could we reduce the 11-acre plot of the school if the school was to go up instead of being wide? I'm thinking of the 9-acre plot.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we are pursuing that. And I'll be talking to the Board of Trustees about that at the next meeting. But that is something that's a good possibility. And I've had those conversations with Alberta Ed over the last couple of days.
Hi there. I just wanted to hop on real quick regarding, sending French immersion students to the Francophone school. There is also, yes, the requirement for a Francophone parent, but there is also a very big difference between French immersion and Francophone language. So I think it would be a challenge for some students going from French immersion to Francophone school. So I don't know if that is a feasible option, but I do know that the Francophone parents, when they were pushing to get their school built, they were at every council meeting. I have lots of friends that attend that school, and the parents actually worked very, very, very hard going to council meetings and pushing the town to get the land and stuff that they required for the build. So if, I think our parents, we would have to band together really and attend those meetings and sign petitions and do all of those things to kind of get this going. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments.
Can I just add that city council and all the new councillors and mayor are aware of this. I sent out emails to all of them when they were running, asking what their position on building a new school, specifically a Catholic high school within our city is. I got lots of responses back, and I can definitely share those with anybody else that would like to see them, but I know that they're in the school council minutes for both St. Andre and Mother Duvel. Lots of them were supportive of it and ready to help us out where they can. But then we are bound by the fact that they have no land or no serviced land.
Thank you. All right. So Caitlin, I think that brings us to a close. So if you could stop recording.